things out. All right, everyone, thanks so much. We are so excited to have Luke Scarmazzo on. We're going to be talking all about his story and his relationship with Glass House, everything, lots to cover. We're very appreciative that you made the time, Luke, especially on a Friday. Really appreciate it, especially on Cinco de Mayo, I guess. I don't know if that's a bigger thing in California than it is here, but appreciate you taking the time. I do want to say that we sometimes do like a Giving Friday component on some of our Nooners. We wanted to definitely do that one for today. So we're going to try to do something a little bit special, a little bit different, trying to support Luke and sort of the Weldon Project, which I know is a key component of his story, which we'll talk about later. But if anybody donates today and tweets out a screenshot of that donation with tagging AlphaNooner and Advisor Shares, we will match the donation up to $100, which will be, or $500, excuse me, $500. And I think what we're going to try to do also is throw in some of the green Glass House shirts and swag and things like that. It's hard to see because it's a giant one, but I'm wearing one of them. We got a matching one in the back. The back is cool, I think. The front is cool too. I don't know if you can hear me still. The front is cool too. But the back, I feel like, is super fun and neat and good. And then, of course, we have the hats, which are also fantastic. So definitely do that. We want to support, of course, and want to get people involved. So feel free to do that. So yeah, tag us and tag AlphaNooner, and we will do that. All right. With all that said, Luke, thanks for joining us again. How's it going? How's your Friday?
Thanks for having me, Mackenzie. Friday's going great. Like you said, Cinco de Mayo out here in California, which is kind of like a state holiday out here, I want to say. Like, people get off work. You know, people start drinking early, margaritas and Mexican food. So it's cool. The culture out here during Cinco de Mayo is really like festive.
That is awesome. I didn't know people actually got time off. That's amazing. Love it. I feel like we have a kind of a similar setup here. I'll see if I can get maybe someone to take a picture in the office. We have a table set up with a variety of tequilas. So I think after this, we're probably going to do a little taste test sort of thing going on. So it'll be good.
Oh, yeah. It's not Cinco de Mayo without some tequila, right?
That is true. You got to be on theme. It's good stuff. Or yeah, definitely tequila and not agave, right? That's not tequila. Tequila's in Mexico.
Yeah.
Who knows? I don't know as much about alcohol, but I would like to talk about weed and cannabis and your story rather than alcohol. So
yeah, that's more my wheelhouse.
There you go. Let's stay in it. Love it. Okay, so then maybe let's just start with kind of who you are, and then let's go through kind of your story because it's kind of a wild ride.
Cool. So yeah, I'm Luke Scarmazzo. I opened one of the first licensed medical cannabis dispensaries in the country, the very first in the Central Valley of California, back in 2004. It was way different industry back then. You know, it was there was loose kind of regulation. We kind of had to self-regulate as we went. Really kind of like the Wild West and the Industrial Revolution, like combined.
Yeah. What got you into it? What was sort of like because I feel like it is kind of risk, but it was kind of not really because it had been around for several years before that. So what was sort of the jump into it?
It was legalized for compassionate use in Proposition 215 back in 96. The dispensary kind of guidelines didn't come out until 2003 and then implemented in 2004, which is when we opened. How I got into it is kind of just natural progression. Like, I grew up in California in the 90s, immersed in like the cannabis culture. My dad, my aunts and uncles, they all grew, smoked, sold weed. So it was like all around me when I was a kid. And then, you know, I naturally was in the industry before it was even an industry. And then when it was legalized and then later the dispensary system was kind of set up, it was just kind of like a natural progression for me to move into that space. I already had like a master's degree in the field. So so it was fun.
That's so neat. Okay, very cool. Okay, so then you set it up, you get it going. Any sort of surprises? How, popular is it? How trafficked is it? What are people coming in for? What's the
okay, so when we opened the first, I want to say 2 or 3 days, most of the people just came in to see if it was real. They would come in and be like, "Are you guys really dispensing cannabis here?" Because I mean, California traditionally is a very blue, left-leaning state, but the Central Valley tends to lean more conservative. So people were kind of leery, in disbelief of whether or not this was a real dispensary that was here.
Yeah.
So a lot of them kind of just came in and checked it out. Like I think the third day, the paper, the Modesto Bee came in, asked some questions if we were a medical cannabis dispensary, just kind of like
Yeah.
brief,
Like a teacher.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
little teaser questions. And then the next day, it was like front page of the newspaper.
Wow.
So, like I said, at that time, it was like, kind of risky, kind of like gray,
Hmm.
loose, nebulous regulations and stuff like that. So I didn't know what was going to happen. I was like expecting, like, am I going to come to work and there's going to be like 10 police officers like waiting for me at work? Or like,
Yeah.
so I really didn't know. But when I pulled into the driveway, it looked like a new roller coaster had opened at an amusement park or something. I mean, the line
Wow.
was literally like all the way around the corner, and I was like,
Wow.
wow.
That's
And then really
awesome.
from that point forward, it grew exponentially every day.
Yeah.
More patients would come through. Sales continued to increase. We like broke our sales record like every week. It was crazy.
Wild.
Yeah, it was pretty wild.
That's crazy. And did you guys have any concerns? I know like nowadays a lot of people talk about, robberies and things like that because of the cash component. How was that? Just curious back then.
Yeah, I mean, there was like dispensary robberies back in those times. We did have like a very, very competent security team that
Okay.
was there. They were super friendly, super welcoming, but also very professional. Um, but like me growing up in the culture again, like I had love from like all parts of the city. So we really like it was more like welcoming and more positive than there was ever kind of like any kind of negative feel. Now I know some of the other operators at that time didn't have that same experience, but
Okay.
we did. We never like had any attempted robberies or anything like that. But
That's
the
very
cash
cool.
component is like that's real, right? And it's still something that a lot of dispensaries deal with today. And that's
Yeah.
why like we have to get some of this legislation passed like safe banking so that, people can be able to bank safely and not have to worry about their livelihoods and their lives being on the line.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk a little bit later about, what is the same and what is different from back then to now because, a lot has changed, but also some of the stuff is still surprisingly the same, which is unfortunate. But
Yeah.
all right, well, I wish the story continued on and it was like, kept beating sales records. Everything was great, they got rec legalization and it was all fine and great. That's not what happened.
No.
Can you tell us about, not when did things turn? You know, how did the
Okay.
feds get involved? Sort of what
Yeah.
happened from
So we operated very successfully until about September of 2006. And on my daughter's birthday, which was September 27th,
Mm,
I was kind of scheduled to go down to Disneyland with her and some of her friends and stuff like that. They actually flew ahead of me because I had some meetings and stuff that I had to take care of.
mm,
And the feds came and kicked in my door when I was sleeping at like 6 a.m. and they did a simultaneous raid to all the other, managers and my co-founder Ricardo Montez,
mhm.
raided the dispensary and we were arrested. And uh, it was a extremely like traumatic and trying time. They came in with like machine guns
Jeez.
and like tactical gear. It was really crazy. It was severe overreach and overkill.
Yeah.
Um, and then we continued to fight our case for the next couple years, and eventually were found guilty in trial and sentenced to 22 years in prison.
And that's from the minimum component as well, right?
Yes, there was a mandatory. We were charged with what's called a continuing criminal enterprise, which
Mm,
in federal terms just means basically you sold what they call a federal narcotic in a business setting. So you had to have employees and be in a managerial position and all these other criteria that you had to meet. And it's loosely or it's known as the kingpin offense. And what it does is it carries a mandatory minimum of 20 years in prison. And that's first offense. It doesn't matter if you had never had a record before, never been in trouble, nonviolent.
mhm.
Um, so the judge really didn't want to sentence us to that amount of time, but
Sure.
his hands were tied. He had to sentence us to what the statutory mandatory minimum was,
Yeah.
and that was 22 or 20 years in prison. So it was
Horrible.
mind blowing because when going into it, nobody thinks that you get that type of time for a nonviolent cannabis offense, right? So,
Yeah.
and I had never been like in that situation or, dealt with any kind of like federal drug charges or anything like that.
Yeah.
So, I was expecting like, the max maybe we could get would be like a year or two,
Yeah.
for we had a licensed dispensary, licensed from the state, licensed from the city, we paid our taxes. So
Yeah.
I was thinking, the most that could happen is maybe we get a couple years in prison or even probation or something. And when the sentence was handed down, it was crushing.
Huge shock. Yeah, I can't. And also on top of that, I feel like a lot of the thing is you're helping people. I know you probably interacted, day to day, at least to some extent, with a lot of the people that are coming in, and being
Yes.
able to have people find remedies for sicknesses or illnesses or whatever, and then being kind of hit with that is a huge slap in the face, and terrible. Yikes.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's no, I mean, nothing that they could really do, and then you effectively just get. Do you think that there was? I don't know if that's conspiratorial or whatever, but do you think that, because it seems um, not personal, but an extreme reaction. Do you think that there was any overlap with your daughter's birthday or anything like that? Do you think that I don't know if that's like too extreme. It's okay if
I mean,
that's
I'd
because that's
hate to think that
oh,
someone would be that vindictive and cruel, but I can't completely discount it because it was definitely coordinated.
yeah,
It was known ahead of time what my schedule was going to be. Um, so yeah, I mean, and I think we had made a music video. I was involved in music. I owned a music label,
mhm,
and I had made a music video that probably a couple months prior to that had criticized the federal government and their overreach into the medical cannabis industry. So that could have had something to do with it too. I was very like before I was involved in the industry, during my operating the dispensary, and even during my incarceration, I've always remained very vocal,
mhm,
um, uh, advocating for justice and the end of the drug war and for
yeah,
justice for the communities that have been impacted by prohibition. So
yeah.
sometimes they don't like the nail that sticks up.
That is true. Even though, again, it's like a freedom of speech thing. I don't think it's like threatening them or whatever. It's just sort of like whatever. That is a separate thing, and I'm again incredibly sorry that that happened to you. Can you talk a little bit about your experience while you were there? Were you able to, communicate with your family? What was it like? That's
Very
odd.
challenging. Very
Okay.
challenging. Going into the federal system with that amount of time, you start out at like some of the higher security institutions. So I'm coming in there with just a nonviolent cannabis offense, but I'm in there with like murderers and rapists and all these crazy things, and it was,
Yikes.
just it was a
Same
very like,
scenario.
yeah, it was like a very trying experience. There was like situations you get these situations in prison like that people see all the time like on TV and stuff like that where it gets crazy in there. I mean like literally it's violent, there's riots and stuff, and like I used to have like a joke with some of the guys, like I would hold up my hands and be like, guys, I'm just here for weed, like I
That
don't
is
want any
true.
problems.
That is true. Yeah, that is why. Okay, did you find anybody else that was there that also had
Oh
a
yeah.
cannabis?
Oh yeah,
Really? Okay.
there is literally thousands of people in federal prison still right now as we're having this interview right now. There's
Mhm.
thousands of people sitting in federal prison for the exact same conduct that all of these companies and MSOs and these multi state
Yeah.
operators are, they're the exact same conduct that they do. There's people sitting in prison for. So that's why I think it's important that like we as an industry come together and say, hey, look, we have to circle back for the people that are still incarcerated because they paid the price and the sacrifice for what we're able to do today.
Yep, for sure. I know on your Twitter, again, I would recommend if anybody has not followed or checked out Luke's. I know a lot of people probably have, but you have a fantastic video there where I know have some names of people that are still being held back, which is great that you're still trying to, get them out of there. So while you were in there, what was your sense of, did you have the sense of, oh, states are coming online? It's weird that online is such a weird thing to say, but states are loosening their legalization process and there are companies coming in. How aware of it were you at the time? Was that, you know,
Very. I was,
you were?
yeah, I really made it a point to stay in contact with the community and just
Yeah,
with the outside world because I never felt like I was going to do the entire sentence. Now, I didn't know I was going to end up doing 15 years of the sentence, of course,
sure.
but I always felt like I would get out early, and I wanted to make sure that I stayed knowledgeable of what was going on and all, and just what the changes in the industry and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So I had mixed emotions on it, right? Like part of me, because I love the plant, I love the therapeutic and medicinal values of it. And I think the more that we come online, like you said, with legalization and stuff like that, the more that people are going to be able to benefit, and the less people are going to be incarcerated, right?
Hmm.
But at the same time, like I'm watching governments and corporations make millions of dollars, and I'm sitting in a prison cell, and I'm like, yo, like I got a 22-year sentence,
Yeah.
and I have to watch the industry grow from a prison cell, and
Yeah.
it was extremely unjust. So like I said, it was kind of a mixed emotions. Like I was a cheerleader on the sideline for the progress, but then kind of frustrated because I'm incarcerated for the same thing.
Not how do you get past that, but to me that would be uh, understandably incredibly hard to square and kind of move past almost. Like, what's your mindset for being able to move past it? Or is it just sort of like, it's frustrating, it's bad, but I'm still going to take control of what I can control and do?
Um, Prayer and meditation, number one.
Okay.
But
That's good.
you know, I always had it in my mind that like what I was going through had a purpose, and that if I could use my experience and the challenges that I was going through now to make sure that no one else had to be incarcerated for cannabis, or I could use my voice and my experience to be stronger and better and get back and be able to kind of help other people with it, was always kind of like my motivating and inspiration, to continue to kind of push through that difficult period. And then my daughter was just like one of my, like, she, when I was arrested, she was 5 years old. Um, and so when I was released, she was 20. But during that whole time, like, she was like my number one advocate. And, she continued to inspire me, continued to motivate me to keep going. And I just was like, I can't let that little girl down. I had to keep going.
That's fantastic. Well, again, it played out again, not quick enough. I think ultimately it's terrible that you had to spend 15 years at all, but can you talk through, getting out, how you got connected to the Weldon project, all of that
Yeah.
component? Because again, it's great.
Sure. So Weldon and I actually met in Lompoc, United States Penitentiary in 2010, I believe.
Hmm.
So he had a similar, draconian sentence for cannabis. I
Yeah.
believe it was like 55 years or something wild like that.
Absurd. Yeah.
So we kind of have like a loose, like, brotherhood in there
Yeah.
with other cannabis offenders, right? So when I heard about his sentence, we kind of linked up. Weldon was in more fluid in like the clemency part of like being released, and I was more focused on like I have to find a way out through the legal mechanisms, right? So we kind of linked up. We kind of shared our knowledge on what we had, and then we became like really good friends.
That's fantastic.
Um,
And also the music component, that must be
yeah,
like a
and the
really
music
important shared
component,
interest. Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
So like we
Very cool.
we hit it off right away.
That's awesome.
So Weldon and I, we opened kind of like what we called a free legal clinic. So we would help like the
Yeah.
other guys that were coming in, because when a lot of people come into prison, they have these huge sentences. They're young. A lot of times, it's not like people who went to college or anything like that. So it's really hard to understand law. I mean, it's hard for lawyers a lot of times to understand the law, right?
Yeah.
So we kind of would open like this legal clinic every night to have people come in. We'd help them with their motions. We'd help them with clemency. And, it was actually really great and gratifying because we ended up being able to get a few people out.
Amazing.
Um, but then Weldon actually got the blessing of being able to be released early. And we talked about it and we said, look, we have to continue this work. We have to continue to like make sure that people who are incarcerated for cannabis have a group out there or someone who's advocating on their behalf. So to Weldon's credit, he got out by himself, started the Weldon Project, started Mission Green,
Mhm.
and has really like grown that organization into like a really powerful and impactful organization. Um, and then Kyle and Graham at Glass House
Mhm.
had heard about the work that he was doing, became associated with him, and then when they heard about my case, they began advocating for me as well. And that really was touching to me because, like I said, there was a lot of companies and organizations that were in the cannabis space, but they weren't really involved in the advocacy side of it. And for me to see, like, a big company that's publicly traded, be able to actually say my name and say, hey, look, this guy has to be free. He was doing what we were doing. There's other people in there that need to be free and that are incarcerated. That to me, like, really was impactful. And so from that point forward, I kind of made a decision to myself that when I was eventually released, that I wanted to link up with Glass House and continue to push that mission forward. So it was really awesome that, like, when I came home, Kyle and Graham were super welcoming. Glass House flew me down to LA.
Nice.
I met all the employees. They're all a huge group of great people. It was like a family. It was like a family gathering down there. It was awesome.
Yeah.
And then we talked about how we could continue to push this needle forward and how we could continue to use the resources and the power of Glass House to be able to make a real impact in this space. So it was really, like, cool to be able to be surrounded by people that were passionate about the cause that affected me and my family, and passionate about a cause that I think it needs to be changed, and it's an injustice that continues today.
Yeah. So it's great, I think, again, to move cannabis forward, but not to leave people behind as you kind of
Yes.
make that transition out. Well, that's fantastic. Again, I mean, great to be working with Mission Green. Great to be working with Glass House. That sort of championing that cause, because that's important. I do want to talk a little bit about what the role sort of as a brand ambassador, what that's about. But I do want to hear just a little bit more about the actual time, like getting freedom and sort of having that, like, that first day. Like, what do you do on that first day coming out? Like, what? That's crazy.
um it was crazy, like, because I didn't know I was getting out. Like, it wasn't like, hey, you're getting out in a month or 2 months, like, it
Oh.
literally happened that day. So I get up in the morning kind of just to do my normal, like, routine. Like, I made some coffee, I was getting ready to work out, and they
Sure.
have, like, these computer terminals where you can check, like, your emails and stuff like that. This is on, like, a closed server that the BOP allows.
Yeah.
So I go in, I log in, and I have, like, tons of emails on there. So I'm like, wow, that's kind of weird. Like,
Sure.
you usually have a few, but this was like, a significantly more amount than I usually have.
Yeah.
So the first one I click on is from my attorney, Carrie Dent, who's uh, a brilliant attorney over at King and Spalding in DC.
Hmm.
And the subject line said, "You're a free man." So I'm just, like, staring at this. I'm staring at this email, like, I couldn't believe it. I'm, like,
Yeah.
looking at it going, is this true? Like, I have waited so long for this to happen, like
Yeah.
15 long years of being incarcerated for a nonviolent cannabis offense, and to have it, like, just be so sudden like that, it
It's
was
crazy.
mind-boggling. So, like, I take my coffee, I log out, I take my coffee, I go set it back in my cell, and then, like, 2 minutes later, I go, I have to go check that again. Like, did that
Yeah. Is
really
it
say
real?
what that said?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was like very sudden. And then the first person I called was my daughter, and I said,
Oh.
"Hey, what are you doing?" She said, "Oh, she's getting ready for a day." I said, "Guess what?" And she said, "What?" And I said, "I'm coming home today." And
That's
she started
great.
screaming and crying, and
Oh.
yeah, it was a very emotional moment. And I had to be off the prison grounds by like 4 o'clock that day. So it was very, like, within the next few hours, it was like, pack your stuff up, get out of here, and it was over with.
So
It
very,
was,
like, a sudden entrance and a sudden. Did they provide any sort of, like, not going out care or resources or anything, or they just like get out and that's it?
they provided me with a ride to the airport, and that was it.
Wild.
And I was
How?
in Mississippi at that time, so
Okay.
the travel back to California is not around the corner.
Yeah.
So, and that was
Oh,
something that we had to pay for ourselves. So it was like, kind of just, it was pretty crazy, but I didn't care at that time. I was like, I
of
will
course.
walk back to California
Yeah,
at this point.
very fair. That's a while. Well, how was it, like, I don't know, being like 15 years, I know, is a long time in general, but also just technology in the world is so different. I know, like, MySpace was big. I was out there coding on MySpace, in 2006 or whatever.
Yes.
iPhone had barely been released in 2007. Like, that's got to be also just a crazy aspect. How was that I know,
Yeah,
it's insane back.
it's really crazy because when I was arrested, we had payphones on every corner and CD players in cars, right?
Yeah,
Just to give some context of like what the time was.
yeah,
And like you said, like MySpace, and there was no such thing as Facebook. There was
yeah,
no such thing as Instagram or any of these things.
mhm.
Um, and like and that's, I think, the biggest jump is technology has jumped so far ahead of time. Like yesterday I was in my girlfriend's car, and she has a Tesla, and it was like
Ooh,
driving itself, and like had all these
yeah,
like computer components to it, and I was just like, I had never even seen an electric car before. So
yeah,
it's definitely been eye opening, but it's also like really awesome, right? Because I feel like I'm getting to experience the whole world again. Like I get to
yeah.
actually, like, everything is new and fresh, and I'm just really kind of taking it in and just really enjoying it for real.
That is fantastic. Okay, wait, Noah has a question coming in, let's see really quickly. So besides family, which of course is gonna be first, what was the one thing or, roughly things that you wanted to first do, eat, see when you got out?
Okay. Absolutely. Like, food was so important, right? Because
Yeah.
what you hear about prison food, it's all true. It's like
Oh.
it's so bad, right?
Yeah.
So food. I On the way to the airport, I actually had the driver stop and get pizza. I was like, I don't care what pizza place it is, just please stop and
Amazing.
get a pizza, and I will, like,
Yeah.
super enjoy it. But one of the other things that I had wanted to do for so many years was be in nature, like, because there's no such thing as like trees in prison, right? So I had never touched like the trunk of a tree in
In
15
15
years.
years.
So one of the first things I did when my lawyer flew out and I met Carrie out here, we went to the Yosemite. And, like, anyone who hasn't been to Yosemite, you have to go there. It's an absolutely breathtaking national park.
Mhm.
And just to be in nature and be able to go put my hand on a tree and just breathe in the fresh air was just, it was so enriching, and just, it felt like, I mean, I'm getting chills just talking about it right
Yeah.
now. It was that, like, impactful to me, and I was just like so thankful to finally be out of a cage and in freedom and in nature. And so, yeah, those were probably, food and nature were probably the two things besides family.
That is wild. Again, I think it's something that probably a lot of people on the show or, I might even take it, for granted in terms of, I can see outside a lot of green trees, whatever. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's that's wild. Well, I'm glad you get to be out here again. Glad to be with your family again and all of that, which is fantastic. I know we're closest on time, so I do want to hear a little bit about, being a brand ambassador. Jeez Louise, I'm having so much trouble today. Ambassador. It's maybe the tequila. I haven't had it yet, but um, for Glass House, what does that mean? What is that? What are you doing? What's sort of the thing there?
Yeah, so it's really exciting, actually, because we're kind of spearheading like a new part of Glass House, right?
Mhm,
Is, Glass House has kind of tapped me to be leading like the advocacy part of their company. And
mhm,
so what we're doing is we're raising awareness for the people who are still incarcerated for cannabis, for like free Parker Coleman, free Jose Valero, free Frank Rogers, free Edwin Rubis, all the individuals that are still incarcerated. And Glasshouse is really getting behind this, and I think it's awesome because now we're putting a very, very worthy cause behind the brand of Glasshouse.
yeah,
And it's good. We're going to make a really big impact. I think we will make the biggest impact that any company has ever made in this space, and that is just so exciting to me. And then just to be able to, like, go around to, the people that are on the ground at the company, in the stores, the bud tenders, and the employees at the facilities, and be
mhm,
able to talk to them and, like, share our story, share what we're doing, and just re-inspire them to say, hey, look, we are doing really good work here, and we're going to make an impact, and what you're doing here is very important. And just to be able to kind of rally the troops like that, and
yeah,
and really, like, like I said, just make a, like, significant impact in the space that is, like, so necessary right now.
mhm.
I'm really excited about what the future holds with Glasshouse and what we can do, and I think it's going to be awesome.
So that's again fantastic that you guys are working through given the structure that we have right now. Just curious in terms of like changes from a government side of thing, from a legislative perspective, is rescheduling enough, descheduling enough? What's your sort of take on how to
we
remedy
have
it to some degree.
we have to get federal legalization across the goal line.
Legalization. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then open up interstate commerce, because
Mhm.
what's happening out here in California is you have like this closed market where you have a lot of these farms and these smaller dispensaries that, when California, obviously grows a lot of cannabis, it has to all stay into this market. So now you make the supply and demand gets all crazy and messed up, and prices drop, and it's really hard for a lot of companies to survive. So we need federal legalization, not only to stop incarcerations and to free people that are still in prison, but to allow these businesses and this industry to really grow. So that's like first and foremost, I think, most important. We need safe banking. We need to be able to have these companies be able to put their money in banks and be safe like that. And we
Mhm.
need to like get rid of these 280E restrictions that are making it to where the companies can't write off like normal tax write-offs like every other company. If you're a legal company in a state that has legal cannabis, it's like a no-brainer to be able to say, hey, we need to be able to write off all the expenditures like any other company, right? Like
Yep.
you're almost making it to where they can't survive. So I think those are like the three most important things: legalization, safe banking, and and being able to get rid of these 280E crazy restrictions.
Yep. I think we're again inching closer. Who knows timing, but it does seem like there is a focus and sort of a drive to get that done. So I really hope that that happens soon, because you're right. People are suffering currently. Companies are having trouble kind of just operating, even though they're following all the rules. They're paying taxes
Yeah.
similar to how you did, and still it's sort of a struggle, which is unfair and not great. Okay, so then before we wrap up, just really quickly, because I know family is so important to you, I was just curious. I know Mother's Day is coming up and also Father's Day is coming up.
Yeah.
So anything you and your mom are doing to celebrate? Anything you and your daughter are doing to celebrate? I know we kind of talked a little bit, but I want to hear it again.
Yeah.
Um,
Um, so my mom and I are going to go out to dinner.
mhm.
Um, she really likes Italian food, so we'll probably go somewhere there.
Awesome.
Um, and then I'm taking her to like a spa to have like a manicure pedicure. I actually got my first pedicure the other day in my life, and I was like,
It's
"Whoa, this is
nice.
like really cool." You know
It
what I mean?
is.
But
Did
it
you get a
was
little
so
foot
like all
massage?
the
Did they give you
guys
that?
out there that haven't had a pedicure, you need to go out and get
That
one.
is true. It is great. Did they give you a little foot massage at the leg rub
Yeah,
thing too?
it
It's
was the
nice.
whole nine. It was awesome.
It's
And
relaxing.
then for Father's Day, it's going to be really special because my daughter's living out in Jersey City right now, but she's going to fly back, and we're going to spend about a week together, and we're going to do a bunch of
Oh,
things. But like just to be able to spend time with her, this is going to be our first Father's Day out together. So I'm like
that's huge.
really looking
That's
forward to it.
huge.
Yeah,
I think
really
you
looking
guys,
forward.
it can be this time or next time if she's still in Jersey. They have that Six Flags that's out there. So if you want
Yes.
like an older sort of version of the Disney thing, you guys could do that together. It would be kind of fun. Although they
Yeah.
have a very scary ride, the King Ka there. Don't recommend that one. It's a little too high, a little too scary, but that's a good one. Okay, well that's
Yeah.
great. I'm so glad that you get to spend that time. Again, really, really appreciate you taking the time to kind of talk with us. Your story is insane. It's very, hopeful and I think very good. It's just very sad that it had to happen at all.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad that you're, using it to make for a better world and putting in the work to kind of help other people that have been similarly affected. And it's great that you're pairing up with Glass House. It seems like a perfect marriage of, you know, what's the word? Values, I guess, ultimately.
Yeah.
So it's
Values and
fantastic.
passion.
Values and passion. That's
Yeah.
perfect. All right. Well, then, everybody out there, really appreciate you guys sitting down with us too. Appreciate you listening. And we will have a replay available soon. So, again,
Yeah.
as a reminder,
Just real quick, if
yeah,
you want to get involved in the advocacy part, go to projectmissiongreen.org and
Project
find
Green.
out how you can get involved.
That is
Uh,
true.
so thank you, Mackenzie. I really appreciate you having on all the viewers and listeners out there. I appreciate your guys' time, and
Of
we can
course.
do this.
Of course. And again, as a reminder, we're going to try to match those donations. So if you tag and yeah, perfect. Tag and hashtag us, we will match that donation. So really appreciate it. Okay.
Awesome.
Thanks again. Really appreciate it. Hope you have a great Cinco de Mayo and we'll catch you next time. Thanks.
Thanks.